Gemini 3.6, Claude Code, and Codex are the three names everyone's throwing into the same sentence right now, and I ran every number I could actually source against what the community is saying about real use. The surprise isn't who wins on paper, it's that the one model with every single published spec in its favor is also the one people say claims a job is done when it isn't. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one to trust with your actual codebase, not just which one has the nicer spec sheet. Cost per token is where this gets one-sided fast. Gemini 3.6 publishes $1.50 per $1 million input tokens and $7.50 per million output tokens, community reported, but the only number on the board. Claude Code has no published per token figure, and neither does Codex. I couldn't find a published figure for either one. That's not a knock on them specifically, it just means their pricing is probably bundled into a subscription instead of billed per token. But when only one product shows its work, Gemini 3.6 takes this round by default. That's Gemini 3.61, Claude Code 0, Codex 0. A price you can see beats a price you can't compare. But a cheap model that doesn't finish the job isn't actually cheap, and that's exactly what the next test gets into. My name is Brian, and I review AI software, so you don't have to. I went through every fact sheet I could find on all three of these, and this is the honest version, gaps and all. Gemini 3.6 scores 49% on Deep SWE and 1537 LO on the front-end code arena, both community reported. Claude Code and Codex don't have a published number for either benchmark. Again, I couldn't find a published figure for the other two. On paper, Gemini 3.6 wins this test clean, but the sentiment data tells a different story. Community consensus points to Claude Code as the stronger pick for repo-wide change planning, and one user reported switching from the Codex harness to Claude Code and seeing an instant improvement. That's not a benchmark, that's a real-world signal, and it's worth remembering every time Gemini's numbers come up next. Gemini 3.62, Claude Code 0, Codex 0, on the scoreboard, even though the scoreboard isn't telling the whole story here. Gemini 3.6 reports roughly 304 tokens per second in throughput, with a time to first token around 12 to 15 seconds, both community reported. Claude Code and Codex have no published throughput or latency numbers I could find. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. 304 tokens a second is fast once it gets going, but a 12 to 15 second wait before it starts is a real lag if you're iterating quickly. Still, it's the only number in the room, so Gemini 3.6 wins this test too. That's Gemini 3.63, Claude Code 0, Codex 0. Raw speed matters less, though, if the model runs out of room to finish what it started, and that's exactly what the next test checks. Stick with me, because the last four tests are where this decision actually flips. Gemini 3.6 publishes a context window around 1 million tokens and a max output around 65,000 tokens. Community reported. Claude Code and Codex don't have a published figure for either measure. I couldn't find a published figure for the other two here either. 1 million token context is a real number for anyone feeding it a large codebase, and 65,000 tokens of output is generous for a single response. With nothing to compare it against, Gemini 3.6 takes this one too. Gemini 3.64, Claude Code 0, Codex 0. That's 4 tests in, and the last one decides whether this is a clean sweep or not. Gemini 3.6 is API only, closed, and handles text, image, video, audio, and PDF input, all community reported. Claude Code and Codex don't have a published deployment or modality spec I could find. Multimodal range this wide is a real advantage if your workflow needs more than plain text. But API only also means Gemini 3.6 needs a harness wrapped around it to actually compete on agentic tasks, the same category where Claude Code and Codex live by default. Still, on published specs alone, Gemini 3.6 wins this test too. Final score, Gemini 3.65, Claude Code 0, Codex 0. Gemini 3.6 wins every single test with a real number attached. $1.50 in and $7.50 out per million tokens, 49% on deep SWE. Roughly 304 tokens a second, a million token context, and the widest modality support in this matchup. Claude Code shows up nowhere on the scoreboard because it publishes nothing comparable, but community consensus names it the stronger pick for repo-wide change planning and finishing what it starts. Codex also has 0 published figures, and the one direct signal we have is a user switching away from its harness toward Claude Code and seeing better results. Now, Gemini 3.6 wins every single test with a real number attached. $1.50 in and $7.50 out per million tokens. 49% on deep SWE, roughly 304 tokens a second, a million token context, and the widest modality support in this matchup. Claude Code shows up nowhere on the scoreboard because it publishes nothing comparable, but community consensus names it the stronger pick for repo-wide change planning and finishing what it starts. Codex also has 0 published figures, and the one direct signal we have is a user switching away from its harness toward Claude Code and seeing better results. Gemini 3.6 wins every single test with a real number attached. $1.50 in and $7.50 out per million tokens. 49% on deep SWE, roughly 304 tokens a second, a million token context, and the widest modality support in this matchup. Claude Code shows up nowhere on the scoreboard because it publishes nothing comparable, but community consensus names it the stronger pick for repo-wide change planning and finishing what it starts. Codex also has 0 published figures, and the one direct signal we have is a user switching away from its harness toward Claude Code and seeing better results. Gemini 3.6 is my default pick, and the decisive reason is simple. It's the only one of the 3 willing to publish a number for every single dimension we tested. If you need documented specs, a huge context window, and multimodal input, that's Gemini 3.6, no contest. But if you're running heavy repo-wide refactors, where actually finishing the job matters more than the spec sheet, Claude Code is the safer bet, based on community consensus rather than a benchmark. And if you're already inside OpenAI's ecosystem and want a familiar harness, Codex is your lane, even though nobody's publishing numbers to back it up. This isn't a tie. Gemini 3.6 wins the scoreboard 5-0. Whether that scoreboard wins your actual project is a separate question, and it's the one the next section is about. Here's what if this helped, the next breakdown on the channel goes even deeper.